Well, hello, Clenton.
Hello, Nick, and forgive me for my hoarse voice. I've got the flu.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. It's gone so cold again, hasn't it?
Absolutely up and down,
Up
up
and
and down.
down.
Just like to introduce myself again to our listeners. My name is Clenton Ferguson. I wear several hats, but the main hat that most people will know me by is I'm the associate director of Think Local at Personal. That looks at personalisation and co-production.
And I'm Nick Sinclair. I work for Community Catalysts. I'm program director, mostly working on helping areas set up local area coordination, but have been working with you for the last 6 years now. I think 6, 7 years almost.
Absolutely, and time has flown.
Time has indeed flown, but what a wonderful time it's been to work with you.
Yes,
And today you're wearing your podcaster hat,
yes, I'm wearing my podcaster hat,
nice
and
shaped hat. A bit
very.
at a jaunty angle, I can
Yeah.
see.
Will you behave yourself?
So sorry.
We've just been speaking to Isaac Samuels, and he wears lots of hats. One of those hats we were speaking to Isaac about was community equipment. It was rich, it was honest,
Yeah,
it was hopeful. He reminded us that equipment, for me, what I took from it was equipment isn't just about function, it's about freedom. Equipment, when done right, is a bridge to living,
yeah.
not surviving. And when done badly, it can quietly become another barrier.
I completely agree with you. I could listen to Isaac all day reflecting on this topic. Isaac points out throughout, it's not a sexy topic, community equipment, but the way Isaac describes the impact, as you say, of getting it wrong and the impact of getting it right, it's life-changing, really. Or the difference between one or the other is life-changing. And I think this podcast should be of great interest to commissioners and occupational therapists and people who are generally working in the world of trying to help people have better lives. And most importantly, people who draw upon community equipment themselves, because Isaac calls at the end of the podcast for setting up similar groups in other areas.
Absolutely. And I think that was the rally call of action that Isaac would like to see from our discussion. I hope that happens in every locality. That we could create, they could create a community equipment peer-led group of people with lived and living experience to have a discussion what that means for them within their locality.
So, welcome everyone to Changing It Up. Today, we're talking about community equipment. Every day across the UK, thousands of people are using community equipment, from things like walking aids and hoists to special beds and bath seats. For many, these are vital tools that don't just support everyday tasks, but open up opportunities for better lives, full of choice, freedom, and connection. And at Community Catalysts, we obviously believe that the people who use this equipment should have the central voice in shaping the services and systems designed to support them. That's why over the past 2 years, we've been working with major national equipment service provider Mediquip to convene and support Equipment Matters, a citizen-led advisory group largely made up of people with lived experience of community equipment. Now, one of the members of this group, I'm delighted to say, Isaac Samuels, joins us today in this podcast to share their powerful insights from their own journey. Many of you listening will be aware of Isaac's work. They're a passionate and dedicated community campaigner and co-production champion. Bringing over 25 years of both lived and learned experience, Isaac's deep knowledge of the challenges faced by marginalised communities informs their commitment to change the way things like community equipment services are designed and delivered. Isaac, it's lovely to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for welcoming me and very exciting to be here to talk about equipment. Didn't think I'd be here talking about equipment. It's not a subject that I often get invited to talk about, to be honest.
Brill. Well, we're very, very delighted to have you, Isaac. Now, before we get into the meat of our questions, we always like to ask some quick fire questions. And this is the first reboot of CommChats, or Changing It Up, as it's called, this podcast. And we've got a new set of questions for a new era of changing it up. And Clinton's going to pose them to you now. We've also thought about calling these Clinton's Famous Five, haven't we, Clinton? But
I I would frame it more around. It's Isaac. It's just a warm up for the listeners to get to know who you are a bit. If you're okay with that.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
So, our first question would be: what song always gets you dancing or singing along?
Well, you probably already know this because we've had a few nights out at various awards and stuff. So anything a bit Whitney. So I want to dance with somebody. I am a child of the 90s and Whitney Houston is my go-to. So I want to dance with somebody and it would get me up boogieing. Yeah, I'm just a bit of a fan, should I say.
Brilliant. My second question is: if you could have dinner with any historic figure, who would it be?
I think it would be Marilyn Monroe, simply as we were born on the same day, and it's nothing interesting. Many people have really interesting, famous people. Um, Unfortunately, I only have like Marilyn Monroe that I was born on the same day, so and it's always intrigued me. And I watched a documentary about her, so I'd like to have dinner with her.
Okay, interesting. What one thing people might be surprised to learn about you?
I think people would be really surprised to learn that I am the most squeamish person in the world. So if there were happened to be any sort of blood or injury, anything, do not call on me. I'm squeamish. I do not do it, and I'd end up fainting. So I think people would be quite surprised. People are always surprised that I cannot cope with anything like that at all.
Okay, thank you for sharing that and being open and honest about that. My last final question is: what motto or phrase you try to live by?
Yeah. So it's be the change that you want to see. And that was used against me. Somebody who I love very much, Hayley Trowbridge, she said to me once, like, you have to be the change you want to see. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then it kind of just stuck. So I now start to use it, and then you see other people using it. But I think we ha always have to be the change we want to see.
I love that. Uh, Thanks for sharing those thoughts, and good to hear that the human being behind the headlines, which is Isaac. So thank you for that. Nick, over to you.
that was lovely, brilliant. No, it was lovely insight. Thanks so much, Isaac. Be the change you want to see. I think it's fantastic. And great to hear your interest in Marilyn Monroe and the fact that we'll definitely not be ringing you up if we ever have an accident or anything. So that's good to know as well. So we'll get on to now to the questions, the main questions, really trying to understand these big questions about community equipment and the work you've been doing with this Equipment Matters group. So can you tell us firstly a little bit about that group, Isaac? What's it trying to achieve and what's your involvement with it been?
When Equipment Matters on MediQuip came looking to do some co-production, I was very skeptical because MediQuip is a private business, and most of the work that I've done is in health and social care and is with kind of the NHS or social care organisations. So I was like very skeptical, but they have proven me consistently wrong. So this group was set up by Mediquip because they wanted to improve the experience of people like me. And there's been lots of stigma and shame around my own use of equipment and lots of missed opportunities. And I thought, well, actually, equipment doesn't get the same airtime or um, prominence within the spaces that I'm in. And why is that? I think maybe because of ageism, maybe because it's not understood, as well as personalization. It doesn't sound as sexy as personalization, but actually, equipment for me has made some of the biggest differences, and it's minimized some of the biggest barriers that I've had. So the group is really a group of people that come together that have benefited from equipment, have had some challenge around equipment, but wants equipment and community equipment to be understood and to be really co-produced so that many more people can have really brilliant lives.
That's fantastic. And what have you done so far really with that group? What are the main things that you've been doing together?
So it's been a very slow, deliberately slow kind of attempt to chip away at what commissioners should be doing. So we've got the internal stuff that as a group we've come together. So we've done the norm informing, storming bits. So that's getting to know each other, understanding where we come from in that terms of our positionality. So you might have people that have caring experience, people that have lots of equipment experience, people new on their journey with accessing and using the equipment to live good lives. We've been a critical friend, and I would say friend of Mediquip, trying to help them ensure that they are supporting people to have the best possible experience of receiving support via equipment services provided by Mediquip. And then we've been challenging around what it means to commissioners, how do they co-produce, how do they ensure equipment provision meets the needs of local populations, how do we move from that, I think, quite negative perception of equipment to one that's quite positive and that is like really humanizing it and seeing the person behind a purchasing store might be something that many people have never heard of. It's a store that helps people like me. I use the purchasing store to just be able to do things that conserves energy, because if I use all my energy, then I can't do stuff that is really fun. Um, so simple things can lead to really big changes in people's lives and lead to people having a life in the first instance. So my journey hasn't been smooth, but if we can use our collective knowledge to make it easier for people, that's what we're about, I think, as a group.
Just on that point, Isaac, for me, I think your focus has been on, what lived experience can shape things, and equity and choice and improving the system. How would you say you were all able to do that?
Yeah, I think the really important thing about the group is everyone's coming with lots of passion and lots of lived and living experiences. Now, to make that work in a group, you need really good facilitation because everybody has different ideas and different areas of passion. I think it's been really great that it's been facilitated by Angela Catley and Paul, who is a commissioner. And Angela is just a really fab community spirited person that's done lots of space, lots of work in this space. And then the group is made up of people from across the country. So we've got, not only got diversity of location, we have diversity of experience, diversity in terms of, identity. And to have that inner space is really important because myself and Alex, who's a member of the group, live in London, but we have very different experiences, but we do have really common things that we connect over is that we believe that equipment can be life-changing. We believe that equipment or access to equipment should be easy and timely. We believe that actually there is a lot of stigma around equipment and it doesn't get the kind of prominence or headline space that person-centered or choice and control does. But most people with long-term health conditions have equipment in their life. We just don't necessarily always talk about it, and it's not as visible in the kind of conversations that we have around social care. It can cost very little, but have such a big impact when it goes right.
When we say equipment, that can mean everything from a walking frame and high tech communication aids. So, from what you've seen and experienced, what does good community equipment actually look like to you?
This is a very difficult question to answer because it will look and feel different to everybody. So I'm going to use some buzzwords. I'm going to use that it has to be based on local need and individuals' needs. What I would say it should never be based on, and currently I think we are in a space where people are worried about finances at a local authority level, worried about kind of, and then that goes into what is then potentially on a catalogue. So for me, it has to be about what people need, how people use it, what does the use of equipment enable people to do, living good lives, for me, really important. And it isn't a one size fits all approach. So what Jackie and her son need, for instance, he used a communication aid. I don't need that. But actually the principle is actually understand what people need, supply them with something that they need in a really timely and easy way, and build people's confidence because actually not everyone has the confidence to just start using equipment. So I was a very reluctant equipment user, if I'm honest, and there was a lot of stigma and shame around, oh my God, I didn't want to use it because I felt that I was losing my identity. There was the stuff around I didn't want my home to look like a hospital. But actually, it saved me a lot of time and it's enabled me to have a lot more energy. It's enabled me to do things that felt like, climbing a mountain, which, my non-disabled peers can do on a daily basis. So it's just that whole kind of, and I'm going to use another buzzword, but, being person-centered, being holistic and understanding what people need and enabling them to get it just makes sense to me. And equipment is probably conversations that I've had further down the line, and they should have been conversations I had at the beginning of relationships with social workers and OTs and all of those kind of people. So for me, it's a positive, but just meeting people where they're at and supporting them to access it.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Isaac. It's really, really interesting insight, and it sort of leads on to our next question, really, because to my understanding of this, the things that are a tiny bit different in terms of equipment, that different to the norm or different to the standard, they refer to as specials. Is that right? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
And these things seem to be much harder to get and can take forever and much more complicated for one reason or another. So have you or anyone within the group ever sort of needed equipment that wasn't standard, and what was that experience like?
So I have. But I think in the group, if you ask that question, you would get a big sigh.
Mm,
Specials are one of these things that seem to have lots of problems attached to them. So there is a lot of kind of um, commissioning of equipment that happens for the everyday kind of person. But it makes me laugh because we as a group, as disabled people, we don't have one single experience. We are very different. Our body sizes, what we need, how our homes, our environment. So the idea of having specials probably to a group of disabled people seems a little bit at odds with we are all really, really different.
sure.
But actually there is things that are not on a typical kind of catalogue or typically prescribed because they're less needed or fewer people locally might need them. So from my case, what was really interesting was that the occupational therapist was asking for a particular piece of equipment because of a particular need that wasn't available because it wasn't available on the framework that they were using. That meant me having to advocate and fight, them having to advocate and fight, only to find out that actually it was available in some areas, but just not in my area, and it costs a lot of time and hassle. I just think that specials there shouldn't be such a thing. I think we need that flexibility and there needs to be much more emphasis on there will be people that we can need to provide different things to, and to provide that in a way that sees them as unique individuals is really important. And I think there's something gone wrong in the commissioning process when commissioners probably just commission based on like general population needs around commissioning for equipment, but within that you'll have people that will need a particular piece of equipment, and then it's a fight to get it.
Mm.
So even if it's something that not many people need, don't make it a big battle. This is something that should be an enabler to, or a vehicle to living a good life. Yeah, and I was on a call the other day, and one of them people were talking, and they were talking about their friend who was 6 foot something, and the profile of the hospital beds just didn't accommodate them. And you just think, well, I know lots of tall people, I have lots of tall family members, so would they fall into that place? Or when I needed a special shower seat, it took months and months, and in that space and time, what could have happened is I could have fallen over and needed more support and care. And what should have happened is that it was really found really quickly. And so I think Medicare are kind of holding that space for different kinds of conversations. We've, as a group, met with some of the manufacturers and tried to influence how manufacturers start to do some of the thinking around equipment.
The thing that has struck for me in answering that question, Isaac, is that the thing we often design for people, not with people. Uh, so, so do you feel people who actually who use the equipment, people like you and others in the group, do you feel they have a real say in how decisions are made?
No, I don't. And what I think we need to do is really understand how we, one, design equipment. So I think there's something about involving people really early on, and that's a wide range of people with a wide range of lived experiences, that to be really diverse. Two, then how we then commission and procure equipment services locally, and that will be based on maybe geographical footprints or areas. It might be based on like lots of complicated things. So often there is the cost element that will come into it. And I think if you start to disrupt the commissioning cycle and start to have people with lived experience saying, why do you only have a catalogue with these products on? I think what you'll find is that there will be less need to fight and advocate for things like specials. There will be much more emphasis on what people actually need rather than the cost element of it. And I think it will give organizations like Mediquip the real chance of actually providing a better community equipment service. And that might be around the responsive times, it might be around what's available, it might be around a different kind of relationship. And I'll give an example. So you need a piece of equipment and you are told that this equipment is going to arrive, and then you have to wait half a day. I don't know any disabled person that's able to wait half a day without knowing when it's going to arrive. So I did a piece with Mediquip that was around looking at how they could have blocks of time to support people accessing their equipment or it being delivered. Another really interesting thing is a lot of the equipment has barcodes on it. And if you're kind of then trying to maybe get something fixed, then you've got to look for barcode. And just really simple things like why would you put the barcode right at the bottom of a hospital bed when that's just not going to be accessible for someone accessing it? So then, like, just that was a really simple thing, like an observation that I wouldn't be able to get that. So how is somebody that's a bit more frailer or would be able to get that? And then it just means that they're more likely to have a fall or da. So I think there needs to be much more co-production and co-design of equipment. It isn't like tech spaces where I think they're much more using people early on. It isn't like other spaces. And I think a lot of it, if I'm honest, is because equipment isn't as doesn't sound as sexy as personalization, choice and control. But I think there's a lot of ageism that happens around equipment. And actually, it's not as joint up in my experience. So I can connect with people here around direct payments. There isn't a forum to connect with people around equipment or the use of equipment. So giving people a platform and a space to help shape the commissioning offer is great. Disrupting that even better, and then hopefully that leads to more people using equipment and actually actually more people having better lives. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that ageism that you're talking about? Because I think it's worth digging into that a little bit more. What do you think's going on there? What's driving that?
So I think there's a couple of factors that we probably need to call here. So in co-production, and I do co-production nationally, the voice of older people is often excluded or something that isn't intentionally sought or visible. So one, co-production itself, we need to do more around including the voice of older people. Two, around equipment, when I ask people, when you think of equipment, what do you see or what do you think of? Often I get the response they think of really frail, older people. And I think there's a bit of stigma and a bit of ageism that comes with that. And
Mhm.
that also speaks to why I think we don't do as much co-production or we don't think about equipment to live good lives. Because I think with older people, and Angela would say this, and I think she's very right, a lot of older people are seen as waiting to go into a service, waiting to maybe come to the end of their journey on this planet, rather than actually, you know what, I'm going to be an old person one day, and I don't want to like not live a great life. I want to be having a great life, and I don't want people to story me up and think of me as waiting for something that somebody of 40 and 50. There is a lot of ageism, there's a lot of stigma. And I think that leads to the ideas and notions that we shouldn't be co-producing with people. They're not going to be interested. They're too old. What I always get it, they're too old, or they'll never get technology, or in my peer support groups for other kind of areas around mental health. Now, everyone there is like 70, 80, 50. Like the older generation are embracing technology. Not saying that there isn't digital kind of challenges, but if you support people, they want to share their story, they want to make a difference. And what is more interesting, it's kind of a captive audience, isn't it? So you've got a lot of older people that are accessing this stuff day in, day out, have lots of experience, more experience than me, but yet their voices aren't prominent in these spaces. So I'm always saying, well, you know what? It shouldn't be the 3% of disabled people in a local area. It should be the 70% that has the larger voice. But we struggle to involve older people.
Thanks, Isaac. That's really helpful to understand that. I can see there's two kind of main dimensions of the challenge there that you described. Um, Now we're really interested to know what you would change about the way some of this system works. So if you could change one thing about how equipment is chosen or given out, what would it be? What would be that the main thing that you think is problematic and that you've already kind of spoken so eloquently about how you've been managing to close some of the gap between the provider's understanding and also the manufacturer's understanding, but what would be, and the commissioners as well. So, what would be the main thing that you would try and do to change how equipment is chosen or given out?
So I think where we need to be is influencing the commissioning cycle.
Uh-huh.
So already by the time somebody has an assessment and our like social care professionals and colleagues will make recommendations, and if that's not available, then the person loses the opportunity to have the right equipment, then the professional is like fighting and advocating. So I think if you involve people at every stage of the process of community equipment provision, even before you start to develop your kind of local offer and really understand what's the need, what should it feel and look like, and really humanize it and think about people's lives, not think about, and often when we think about like equipment, people go to like the physical, so a commode. They don't go to the story. So a commode enables somebody to stay in their own home, enables somebody to stay connected to their family and loved ones. It's more than just a piece of equipment. It's a bit of a lifeline in some people's cases, but actually it's vital in other people's. Like for me, having a profile bed means that I can conserve my energy, means I can work, means I can have a relationship, can do the things that I once couldn't. And I don't think that story gets shared. I think the story that gets shared is in this area we had 500 people that we gave profile beds to. It cost this amount of money, and we get stuck with the bed rather than actually something like a bed can enable somebody to conserve some energy, to go out and do something else in the world, to contribute to society, have a job, not be in pain for the rest of the day. Use the human stories to harness the power of equipment and equipment provision in our communities.
Thank you. I just you use the term commissioning commissioning cycle. If we had to, what does that actually mean? Because I hear the term used quite often. Commissioning cycle. So, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so in reality, I don't think we have a commissioning site. Most places do procurement where they buy. So commissioning for me starts with understanding what people need, listening to people and their families, understanding what they need, gather that insight and knowledge, then develop a specification, and that might be a tender of what you need to provide locally, ensure people are involved in that process, really then provide what people need. People don't care if it's Mediquip or it's another organization. What they care about is that one, it meets my needs. Two, I have a say in it. Three, I can help evaluate it and review it. And particularly evaluate and review bit of commissioning doesn't necessarily happen. So when it goes well, how do we ensure lived experience is involved in that? When it goes wrong, how do we ensure the voice is heard? How can we change based on this is what we might have done in year one, this is what we'll do in year two, and so on and so on. So I think involving everybody in that from what we need, how we're going to deliver it, to now we're delivering it, how is that working, and then back again in 3 years to we're going to do that all over again.
Thank you for explaining that. And here's the big one to finish with, the big question to finish with. We sometimes hear people say, "Why, why all the fuss about equipment? Is just needs to be cheap and basic." What would you say to that mindset?
So I would say if we go into any kind of thinking that thinks about cost and fuss, what we then do is not understand hope and potential. So equipment can enable people to live the best possible lives, stay in their homes longer, have less problems and less challenges. And actually, there is this idea that if we just focus on cost, we'll get it right. And actually, for me, what we need to focus on experience. So as long as it works for the people that it's intended for, as long as you, and there are challenges because we're weighing up, like, public purse versus individuals. But I think the cost thing often dehumanizes the process, and we just think about the money, not the outcomes. And if something costs a little bit more, and what then do we know about? So we often talk about costs. So we need the cheapest thing. But if that doesn't work for someone, in the long run, it's going to cost more. So I always think about, and I think this is a phrase that I learned from you, that invest to grow kind of thing. So if you like put a little bit more resource behind something, it might work. It might work better than you imagined. And actually, people might need less support in the long run because they're able to manage a lot longer. I've also seen lots of problems happen. So where people have waited a long time for a piece of equipment because it's too costly and not on the catalogue, they're falling down the stairs, ended up in hospital, cost the system so much more money. But the cost to the individual and that family, they're never going to get that time back. That person is never really going to recover. So for me, the cost is about the cost of people not living good lives. And if we frame it around that, then I think we will get it right. It's not just that financial cost, it's the cost of what people will miss out if we just focus on cost. It is about people having real choice and control, supporting people to maintain and uphold their dignity in their own homes. It not only supports the individual, it supports their loved ones, people they employ to support them. And another thing that I'm going to throw out there is please, wherever you are in the country, set up a group that is going to help you think and deliver your equipment services. The power of lived experience in this space is tremendous, and people want to help, will help you, and ultimately, you will do co-production, and we know that co-production saves money but enables people to have really good lives. So equipment matters because people matter, and we should never forget that.